It's connecting. All right. So we're live now. I'm sure the notifications are going to go out. Now on my screen, I can see the who's watching symbol, and it's going to take a moment. We're at 0. So in just a few moments here, we'll get some people watching, and we'll get her cracking. There we go.
Hope the signal stays good.
Yeah. You might want to crack the window there, Dennis, and not because you got gas.
Yeah, I climbed the tallest red pine I could find and duct taped my modem to the top of it just for this.
Did you? Oh, we got a few people jumping on already. So as we wait for others, if you guys want to shout out where you're watching from or your initial thoughts from the vote on July 11th, the guys at Overdrive, good evening.
What's up, guys?
Kevin, Josh, the group over there. Now, Jordan, I actually saw, I was looking through your page there, and you did a podcast with them recently, right? At Overdrive?
Yeah, I sat down with Josh and Kevin, and we actually did, it's a 2-part series on the DMI debacle, as Josh entitled it. It was pretty gritty. I would say it's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but it was a no-holds-barred, 100-proof truth expose of what went on. And I really take my hat off to Josh and Kevin for being fearless advocates for the outdoors. I love the fact that they're not afraid to talk about the uncomfortable issues.
Yeah, that's cool. That was pretty. I haven't listened to it yet. I got to check it out yet. Because I just saw that. So I'll definitely be giving that a listen. And I encourage everybody else, if you want to hear more from Jordan and the guys over at Overdrive, definitely want to check that out.
Yep.
Robert checking in. How you doing, Robert?
I've been a big fan of Josh Mapes and Kevin for a long time. Josh and I did actually a podcast with them on their page about how I became a massive public land hunter. I've been doing it for 30-some years, and that was kind of cool. And they've got a lot in common.
Right on. So looks like we're up to around 20 watchers right now. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We have a guest, not something we usually do here. It's usually just the guys, and we're shooting the breeze. But tonight, Jordan Hoover joins us from the UP. He was part of the DMI up there in the UP, and had some input that he wanted to share to the NRC before their vote. And he reached out to us and just wanted to let us know how that all went down, because he definitely got a behind the scenes look at everything. And we'll get into it. He's going to elaborate, and it's just going to confirm, I think, a lot of what a lot of Michigan hunters, with the way the votes went, it's going to confirm what we already knew, that we got some people on the NRC that really have no business making decisions of the resources here in Michigan. So Jordan, thanks for joining us. If you would, just why don't you tell everybody about yourself a little bit?
All right. Well, Tim, Dennis, Ray, thank you guys for having me so much. I really appreciate you guys sharing your platform. And just like I conveyed about, Overdrive, I appreciate anybody who is willing to speak up and stand up in this day and age, because unfortunately, that's few and far between. A lot of people will have the proverbial bar top conversations, but when push comes to shove and they got to put their face and their name behind something, they don't want to do that. So respect to you guys for that. Appreciate the opportunity. So my background in shorthand, not originally a Youper. Don't say that too loud. Yeah, I grew up. Yeah. When I was a real little kid, we lived in Livingston County in the Pinckney area, and not too long into my adolescent years, we moved north to Calumet in the Keweenaw Peninsula, and I was gone for a number of years doing different things. Came back. The grass ain't greener, as they say. And 15 years, 4 sons, and a wife later, here I am. I call Barriga County home right now. We're about 6.5 miles out of Lance, going towards Skainee at the foot of the Huron Mountains. And gosh, I mean, my earliest memories as a kid, I had a fishing pole in my hand, or I had a bow in my hand, or I was, at the gun club with my dad, whatever the case may be. I grew up in this way of life. And for us. It wasn't simply weekend recreation. It was part of who we were as people. And I've carried that on now that I have children. You know, they're baptized in backstraps just as I was. My wife hunts. All 4 of my children hunt. My oldest is 14. My youngest is 8. My youngest shot his first deer last year on the youth hunt. He got himself a 6-pointer. He was stoked. So, yeah, public land hunting has been my forte. I don't have a big sprawling, you know, several 100-acre private camp with a 10-acre food plot. I get out and I stomp the ground. I cover 4 counties a year on average, and go through a couple oil changes on my truck and my ATV and a couple pairs of boots every year, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But as far as the advocacy portion goes, you know, my father before me was very engaged in advocacy for our deer herd here in the UP. He spent a little bit of time with MUCC doing policy work there. And as a young man, I always had it impressed upon me by my father that being a steward was important, that anyone can be a hunter. It doesn't take talent to kill. It doesn't take a lot of effort to kill. But going beyond that, it's about giving more than you take, and it's about the stewardship aspects and preserving our way of life. It's about what comes after you, leaving it better than you found it. So for me, growing up in a house like that, it was just a natural fit that once I became a man, I followed in my father's footsteps and took up advocacy for our natural resources. And I spent a little bit of time with a couple different organizations. One was a national organization, Hunter Nation, and the other was UP Whitetails Association. And I just found that those weren't a good fit for me. So ever since then, I've soldiered on as a independent, I guess you could say, unaffiliated with organizations, and have spent a lot of time cultivating relationships with other stakeholder groups, with legislators, the Department of Natural Resources, etc., and just building those relationships and rapport to try to get something done for our UP deer herd.
Awesome. So you're just like the rest of us, born and raised here in Michigan. You kind of transplanted north, but you said baptized in backstraps, and I saw, you know, you guys get out and do quite a handful of fishing too. So you're right up there by Superior, and I know there's excellent fishing up there.
Yeah, we had the little guys out the other day, and they hooked up with 5 Lakers and 1 King, so they were stoked. They had an excellent morning.
Nice, that's awesome. So let's talk about how you came into the Deer Management Initiative. I guess quick background for everybody that doesn't know: the National Resources Commission is appointed by the governor, and they're appointed to make decisions that impact, you know, us as outdoors men and women, our hunting, our fishing heritage. You know, the future is in their hands, and our fate and everything that goes with it is in their hands. And part of this voting process and the regulations, there was a deer management initiative. There was Upper Peninsula, Lower Peninsula, and I believe groups within those, right, Jordan? Was there different groups, or?
Oh, it's just the UP and LP team.
Okay. All right. And so that was an application process. People could apply to be involved with that. And through the selection process, Jordan was picked to help represent the UP hunters up there and help impact the decisions made. So, Jordan, with that being said, you know, why did you feel compelled to apply and be involved in this process?
Well, Tim, I mean, as I alluded to in our intro there, I mean, I grew up with this. I grew up with the ideology that these resources don't endlessly self-sustain, that we have to be guardians of them. We have to be watchful. We have to be vigilant. And I've been involved in these things for many years in an independent capacity. And when the DMI opportunity arose, I didn't hesitate. I threw my hat in the ring immediately. It was really unique from the aspect that typically, and some people may not know this, advisory teams for deer are not a new idea. Back in the late 90s, we had RDAT, the Regional Deer Advisory Team, which was pretty much a knee-jerk response to the devastating winters of 96 and 97, where we lost 250,000 deer back-to-back winters. But that advisory team, the way they constructed it, it was reserved specifically for heads of traditional stakeholder groups. So your Whitetails Unlimited, your QDMA, UP Whitetails, etc. But what made this different was the department was very public about the fact that they wanted a broader pool of input. They wanted independent, unaffiliated voices at the table. And that was something completely different that had never been done before. Because in total fairness, I mean, they kind of continued on for years asking the same group of people the same questions, expecting different answers. And I think somewhere in an office someplace, the light bulb finally went on that if we want a different result, maybe we should ask different people different questions. So I was excited for that. I thought that was a positive step forward, and broader input's never a bad thing.
Right. So you were selected. Kind of walk us through that process of meeting up with the other candidates up there in the UP, and the conversations that went behind what you were able to present to the NRC.
So I think we started about the end of February, maybe early March, when everyone was finally selected, and everybody got a personal phone call from Chad Stewart, basically letting them know that you'd been selected and did you still want a seat at the table, kind of thing. So what transpired then is we had kind of an introductory meeting with Chad, and I think the wildlife chief, Sarah Thompson, was there. Chairman Baird from the NRC was there. And it was kind of an overview of what they wanted from us and how things were supposed to go. And from that point, we had a month and a half, 2 months worth of pretty intensive, I'll call them educational courses. We met 2 nights a week for 2 hours of crack. And this was both the UP and the LP teams together at this point for all these courses. And we would have guest speakers. So they were experts in various resource disciplines, for example, forestry, and we'd get a presentation on northern hardwoods regeneration. Or then we'd get a specialist that came in from Wisconsin, and they talked about hunter demographics and trends with hunter numbers, and are people favoring archery or rifle, or the decline in hunter numbers, all those sorts of issues. We had presentations on predator-prey relationships, the whole 9 yards. It was really well put together. There was a lot of material there, and I'm a deer junkie and kind of a data nerd. So, I mean, I eat that stuff for breakfast. I love it. For some people, it might have been a little heavy, but it was all good, solid information, and for the most part, well presented. Most of those courses, if you will, were accompanied by 15 or 20 minutes of Q&A for anybody that wanted to ask something. And then after that educational period, we had the in-person meetings. The LP team met in Bay City a week ahead of us, and then we met in Marquette. And those in-person meetings were a day and a half. So that's kind of a 10,000-foot view of the process of what we did. For us, with the UP team, trouble kind of started early. There was a group of individuals that I'll refer to as the coffee clutch. Some older gentlemen who are longstanding stakeholder group leaders that had ideas about what they wanted to see done for deer management, which essentially was nothing, more of the same. And they began requesting to meet with various small numbers of our UP DMI group at truck stops or restaurants or wherever. And it came to light that they already had a whole management plan that they'd put to paper, and they were basically trying to wrangle people's votes behind the scenes, pressuring people to side with their way of thinking. I can't tell you how inappropriate I thought that was. We all obviously have our own opinions, our own views, our experiences shape our outlook. But I thought that what we were asked to do was to put aside all those personal bias and to look at the information objectively. And if there's one thing that was impressed upon us very clearly from the get-go by Chad Stewart himself, and I quote, "Whatever crosses the finish line has to be scientifically based and defensible with data. Quote. That was the admonishment from the onset. And when you looked at the things that this group of guys was bringing to the table, there was no science supporting it. And I'll just give you an example. They wanted to completely ban antlerless harvest in the UP, basically save a very small number of lottery permits in the centralized UP and then in the Menominee Garden area to allow pretty much typical take for antlerless in the UP. We've had that policy in place for almost 10 years, and that has utterly destroyed us. Healthy buck to doe ratios are 3-4 to 1 usually. I wouldn't hesitate to tell you that most places in the UP, you're 12 to 1 and worse. The further north and west you go, the worse it gets. That's not to say there's not better areas. There is, that banana belt of the UP and Menominee, Southern Dickinson, the Garden Peninsula, down that way. It's better. But that's a whole different part of the peninsula. Like we were talking before the show about the biodiversity of the state. It's just incredible. So the things that these guys wanted to do just weren't things that were supported by science. And we'd had 10 years already to witness the effects of the current policies. And nobody in my team was much supportive of those ideas continuing. So moving forward from that, we got into the in-person session down in Marquette. So on our first day, we dealt with a lot of non-regulatory issues. So just as an example of that, a non-regulatory recommendation from our team might have been, we'd like to see the DNR increase their holdings for deer winter complexes in the UP. We'd like more state ownership of those kinds of things. We'd like to do habitat improvement work, any of that sort of stuff. Day 2, which was basically a half a day, was our regulatory day. So that's kind of the funny part, right? Is we've done months worth of all of this work in these classes and these lectures and guest speakers, and we had half a day to make deer regs. It's a bit crazy. When that all started that day, everybody kind of just wandered in, and it was a big conference room. We sat down at our tables. Everybody had a cup of coffee and a donut or whatever it was, and they're kind of BSing. And all of a sudden, the presenter, Alexa Warwick from Michigan State University, she was kind of conducting the meetings, and Chad Stewart and Sarah Thompson were there assisting as well. And Commissioner Anthony from the UP and Commissioner Baird from the LP were there. So she teed it off. She says, all right, she says, let me get everybody's attention. She says, the moment we've all been waiting for, she says, we're going to make deer regs. She says, I'm going to set the timer. You got 25 minutes. You're working with the people at your table. You got a poster board. You got a Sharpie. Go. I got guys that are still, kind of rubbing the sleep out of their eyes like, holy cow, we're making deer regs. That wasn't me. I couldn't sleep the night before. I was at the gym at 5 o'clock that morning at the hotel, just trying to get my head straight. So I was ready to go, but it was a big ask. And if you think about the enormity of what we're trying to do, and we're asked to do it in 25 minutes, it's incredible. So I had a good group. My table was really good. I had Bill Scullin from the DNR. I had Mark Zitnick from the DNR. I had Chris Webster from forestry, private forestry. There was myself, and then I had Bob Jones from the Michigan Bowhunters Association out of the Lower Peninsula. He had a member in the UP that was supposed to be there, but unfortunately he got precluded due to last minute work mandates, and Bob stepped up and filled in. So huge kudos to Bob for that. He actually did double duty for the state of Michigan, not 1, but 2 DMIs. God bless him. So we went to work. Everybody furiously scribbled on the boards and talked amongst ourselves and kind of negotiated and debated. There were 5 poster boards when the timer finally struck. We had A, B, C, D, and E. And basically the D and E and the B board said exactly the same thing in exactly the same language. How might that happen? Well, the Coffee Clutch Club had distributed themselves well enough at the tables that they were able to get those things on the board, not once, but 3 times. They were quite proud of themselves. So they sat back in their chair and they kind of had their smug smiles. And Alexa Warwick, the lady from MSU, walked around the room and she says, wow, she says, these 3 boards, they say the same thing. She says, well, I tell you what, we're not going to vote on the same subject matter 3 times. So we're going to make those one board. Boom. They weren't happy. They weren't happy at all. And they said so. She says, well, listen, I'm not eliminating anybody's ideas. We're making 3 boards that say the same thing, one board. That's all. So we kind of got a giggle out of that. But so we're left with A, B, and C. That's what's left. And A board belonged to Dan Featherstone's table. They were a group of younger Yoopers that had some pretty decent ideas. The B board was the old timers. And then the C board was my table. And what we were asked to do then was to vet each board against our objectives, our management objectives. When we first started all of this, we had this big brainstorm session and they said, what are the things that this team wants to accomplish for the UP deer herd? What are your management objectives? So she put that up on the overhead and put all the boards up front and said, one of the boards has to go. Which board is least effective at achieving the management objectives? B board got voted out by a pretty healthy majority. The old timers were pretty upset and pretty vocal about it. One of them actually left the meeting. 2 others of them sat back in their chair with their arms crossed and didn't want to participate. Sour grapes, I guess, would be the polite way to say it. So ultimately, I was assuming it would be a head-to-head between the A and the C boards, and one would be the final recommendation. But that's not how it went either. Instead, we did a line item vote on each individual recommendation between the A board and the C board. So the final recommendation that came out of our team was a checkerboard, if you will, of A and C. I wasn't necessarily happy with everything that came out of it. And I don't think anybody else was either. But I think that's also a sign of a good compromise. Everybody got something. Everybody gave something. Nobody got completely shut down. So I felt good about it overall. So the process concluded and somebody had to write a final report and what was called a minority report. Nobody wanted to do any of it. I was reluctant to raise my hand because I was pretty exhausted from everything we'd already done, but nobody was raising their hand. So I put mine up and I said, well, yeah, okay. I volunteer for indentured servitude. So I had the task of basically compiling all of the charts, graphs, pertinent information, cataloging the whole process, the presenters, everything, and compiling a report and final recommendation on paper from our team to submit to the commission. And Justin Tomei from MUCC was also a part of the UPDMI. He had the responsibility of drafting the minority report, which was supposed to be basically a collection of other good ideas that just didn't make the final cut. If there's one thing I can tell you about our process, it was so compressed. It was so rushed. There were a lot of great things that got glossed over or didn't make the final cut simply because we didn't have the time to talk about them. So those are the kinds of things that were supposed to be presented in the minority report. It was almost more of a supplemental report, if that makes sense to you. Mm-hmm. Ideas that we felt were worthy of further consideration and further discussion, but we didn't get to. So I'm on my way out of the meeting in the hotel lobby, and I can hear one of the guys from UP Whitetails letting Chairman Baird have it 50 feet away in the hotel lobby, making his dissatisfaction very public. Those guys left that meeting and told the whole world that the vote was rigged and they were misled and the DNR deceived them, and just threw a whole bunch of gas on the fire. It was pretty disappointing, to be honest. I certainly didn't see anything that I felt wasn't above board, and none of us knew how the process was going to go. We'd never done this before. So it would have been impossible for anybody to, quote unquote, stack the deck as far as the vote goes or the process, because nobody knew. But that was the allegation. And again, it was more sour grapes. You know, the bottom line was they didn't get what they wanted out of it, and they were gonna raise heck. Mm-hmm. So I began writing the final report and got that all compiled and completed. And the Old Timers Club started to reach out to me via email, carbon copying half the universe and the commissioners and everybody else. And they had written basically letters of grievance, complaining about the process and complaining about the regulations and complaining about our team's recommendation. And they thought I was going to attach these things to our final report and hand them to the commissioners. I said, absolutely not. I said, if you want to dissent and you have concerns, I said, by all means, bring them to Chad, bring them to Sarah, bring them to the commission for all I care. But this isn't the place. I don't want to attach that to the report because it undermines the unity and the integrity of what we've done as a team. And they were not happy with that. So I finally relented. I said, well, listen, I'll talk to Chad. I'll talk to Sarah. If they want me to attach it, then I'll do that. That's not what was wanted. So they sent in numerous letters from their respective personnel organizations complaining, and I sent the final report. And that's kind of how that wrapped up. That was the end of May. I want to say May 24th was D-Day for submitting the report. So shortly thereafter, the Natural Resources Commission made a public statement that they were going to hold what they called a DMI work day, where they were essentially going to host a abbreviated commission meeting, a special meeting. And the specific purpose was to publicly unpack these DMI recommendations and discuss them in the open and allow the hunters and the outdoorsmen in the state of Michigan to bear witness to that process. I reached out to them immediately, and I reached out to the department as well. And I said, I think it would be really good to have at least some of us, maybe the report writers from each team, UP and LP, on hand at the workday. That way, if the commissioners have any questions, they want clarification of anything, they want to know how we arrived at some conclusion, we can articulate those things face to face to the commissioners, no middleman. And the commission did not have any interest in having us join them at the workday. The reply back was, well, we're going to have limited public comment, 3 minutes instead of 5 minutes. So, gee, Jordan, if you'd like to drive 500 miles to speak to us for 3 minutes, boy, we'd sure love to have you. I didn't go.
Right.
The Old Timers Club from the UP definitely went in force. The DMI workday, as it unfolded, was a disaster of epic proportions. I've seen a lot of poorly run meetings in my lifetime, and that was probably one of the worst. It appeared to me as if there were commissioners that had no idea of the subject matter that was being discussed. I mean, for the politest way I can put it is they showed up to class having not done any homework, and they didn't bring a pencil either. It was a bad look. It was a real bad look. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of protocol issues. But ultimately, here's what they did. In a matter of mere moments, they took my team's entire 3 months of work, all of our recommendations, and threw them in the trash. They did not accept as written one recommendation from my team, not one. They will tell you that they did not reject them completely. As far as we're concerned, they most certainly did. The only couple things that they did that weren't an outright rejection, our team had a recommendation to moderately reduce black bear numbers. That was deferred to what they call the box 3, which was items that they wanted to push to another venue and another time. So our bear recommendation actually got pushed to the bear user group and to next year during the bear regulation cycle. And we also recommended reinstatement of the year-round coyote hunting season. And that also went into box 3, deferred to the fur taker user group and the next reg cycle. And all of our deer recommendations were removed. They were not accepted. I'll stop there for questions and input before I continue.
Right.
Yeah.
Dennis, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so if you want to chime in here.
Are they doing any kind of habitat improvements up there at all?
So the state only owns 20% of the DWCs in the UP. And DWC, for those that don't know, it's called the Deer Wintering Complex, or commonly referred to as a deer yard. So what the state's able to do is somewhat limited, just by virtue of the fact that their holdings are so limited. The vast majority of the land is held by timber companies, private ownership. There's been a group called the UP Habitat Work Group, which has a lot of the same individuals that are in the Old Timers Club on it. They've done a few things over the years. I don't think it's been very consequential, and I think even they would tell you it hasn't moved the needle. The habitat issues that we're facing here in the UP are critical mass. That is arguably the single biggest issue that we face, is habitat loss, habitat destruction.
That's crazy. Yeah, the reason I was asking is down here I noticed there are a couple places like Sharonsville State Game Area. DNR comes out and they put in food plots and stuff like that on the land over there, but they do a lot of stuff. There's an organization that works out of there called Michigan Operation Freedom Outdoors. I don't know if you heard of them or not, but they started out helping veterans coming back, with PTSD and stuff like that, trying to get them some normalcy back in their life. So they progressed from that to helping anybody with a disability. And I know that DNR steps in and helps with that property and a couple other ones around the state. And that's kind of why I was asking if they might be doing something like that up there.
I'm working right now with the Department of Natural Resources and other private parties, trying to get a program off the ground to do habitat recovery work here in the UP and address those issues. It's called Winter Shield. And basically what I'm trying to accomplish is getting partnerships locked in between public and private landholders in the state of Michigan, getting everybody talking the same language, having the same conversations, and trying to get organizations to understand. And I'll say, for example, I had a meeting with Lime Timber, and I sat down with them, and he was very blunt. He says, you want more deer, and deer eat my trees. We got a problem. I said, no, I get it. He says, you deer guys are never satisfied. You always want more deer. I said, well, now hear me out. I said, I'm interested in a deer herd that is within its carrying capacity and nothing more. So I don't want to take bread off your plate. And he calmed down quite a bit. We had a really good conversation and found some middle ground. And by the end of the discussion, it was an open door. If you want to plant trees on my ground, you partner with the DNR, you show me a forestry plan, and you can plant all the trees you want. But it's having those conversations and building those relationships. That's where we're at with Winter Shield. That's what we're trying to do right now.
So Jordan, I have a question, and just to provide some clarification. So a lot of those educational meetings that you guys went through for the few months about timber management and the different subjects, who put those on, or who organized that for you guys? Was that the DNR that set that up, or?
As far as I know, yes, that was a collaborative effort between Chad Stewart and Sarah Thompson, who's our wildlife chief, and they lined up all the presenters and speakers and guests. Okay.
So, and then my follow-up question to that was the commissioners, the National Resource Commission, were they the members of that? Did they get the same presentations, or was that an optional piece for them?
Yes, any of the commissioners who wanted to attend any of those sessions were welcome. And I did see various commissioners attending here and there. I mean, when you've got 40 DMI members and numerous DMI staff and a few commissioners, it's kind of hard to keep track of all the names scrolling on the screen who was there. I couldn't tell you for sure which commissioners were at which meetings, but I did see various commissioners log in and participate in some of the meetings. They didn't talk. usually, but they did take it in on occasion.
Okay. Okay. I just kind of wanted to clear that up because I wasn't too clear on that myself. But from what you said, it sounded like it was pretty solid presentations. Actually, when you were talking about it, I kind of was thinking to myself, man, I wish I could have heard that information. So I'm just like you. I always want to learn and I want to know more and make me a better hunter and steward of the land.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Tim, because since the DMI has ended, all of our DMI work sessions, those educational sessions, have been made public by the DMI or the DNR, excuse me. They're available on the DNR website.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. Ray, did you have something?
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay, yeah. I
I'm
thought you
learning
were,
as I go. So
sorry, I thought you were reaching for the mute button.
I did. I put my mic back on. I had it on.
So, all right. So we do have a couple things here. Heather Reimar, she asked Jordan, can you summarize what you would like to see in terms of deer management in the UP?
Summarize. All right. Elevator speech. So first and foremost, as I already mentioned, I think habitat is mission critical, because until we address the habitat shortfalls, I think what we do with regulations is relatively inconsequential by comparison. Winter is king in the UP. And until we have healthy, sustainable thermal covers for our deer that are in better shape than they are right now, and restoring some of the, I'll say, severely depleted deer yards that we had that maybe are no longer functional, I think that anything else is secondary to that. And admittedly, I mean, that process is going to take the rest of my lifetime and then some. I mean, there's no replacing old growth cedar, at the snap of a finger. You can't just replace a 100-year-old tree. That takes time. It takes diligence, takes a lot of effort. But that said, with that understanding, I think we need to do what we can to also reduce predator load. We have a suite of apex predators up here that beats the deer to death. There's no doubt about it. Obviously the wolf is entangled in all kinds of litigation and is a federal issue at this point. So I'm not even going to waste my oxygen on that right now. But I think reinstatement of the year-round coyote season and a reduction in the number of black bears would probably help the deer substantially. Anything that we can do, any mechanisms we have for predator management, we need to leverage those things to help our deer out. Regulation-wise, I'm a big proponent of bringing back doe with a bow, the archery doe tag. Our sex ratios are terribly, terribly out of balance, and there's a devastating cascade of biological impacts that result from that. And I can get into that if you want, but I'm trying to be brief for sake of time. Until we tighten those sex ratios, we're going to continue to have a problem. You're looking at heightened buck mortality. You're looking at multiple strikes against fawn recruitment and survivability. The Predator Prey Project also showed us that when you have elongated breeding seasons and thereby elongated fawn drop, the depredation on our fawns is significantly higher in areas where those sex ratios are horribly out of balance. So for 50 years consecutively prior to 2015, we had the archery doe tag available, and there was never a demonstrated biological negative impact on the deer herd ever at any point. At its peak, I believe the all-time record doe harvests, and this was back in its heyday, so like 1995, 1994, when we had 1 million deer in the UP, it comes out to something like 0.4 deer for every 4 square miles. That's how many antlerless deer were killed with a bow. That's inconsequential. Anybody that tells you if we start shooting 0.4 does for every 4 square miles is going to mess up our deer herd, they need to take their medication. I think that while we also have a sex ratio issue that we have to address with the does, hand in glove with that, I think we have too few bucks. Heightened buck mortality rates is one of the byproducts of imbalanced sex ratios, and I'll just quickly describe that. In a herd where it's a 3 or 4 to 1, It's documented scientific fact that a buck will lose about a third of his body mass index during that breeding season because they don't eat much. They're breeding, they're fighting, they're running, they're not eating a lot. So if you triple or quadruple that buck's breeding duties, it's reasonable to understand that that is a severely depleted buck. And in the context of a UP winter, and you finish up your breeding in the end of January, where do you go to replenish yourself? You don't. You're a dead deer walking. At that point in our UP wilderness, whatever fat reserve you have is what you have until spring. So I think that we're losing a lot of our best breeding class bucks during that February and March bracket due to that depletion, and just the fact that they'd be completely worn down and more vulnerable to depredation as well. So for that reason, I would also personally be favorable to go into a one buck tag system. That's something that was discussed in the UPDMI, but it didn't come across the finish line. I was a little disappointed by that. But if we bring back the doe with a bow on the combo license that we had forever, that effectively turns the combo tag into one buck tag. Because a lot of people up here really depend on having venison in the family freezer. There's a lot of small rural communities, and that venison's important for everyday life. It's not recreation. So if they had the opportunity to take a doe with the bow, that's what they're going to do right away in October. And then they're going to spend the rest of the year chasing that one buck that they want to go after. And I think people, when they have one buck tag in their pocket, are going to be a little more judicious about what they take. And maybe that 3-inch spike doesn't get shot at 8:05 November 15th. So hopefully that's an answer. That's about as brief as I can make it. The regulations are complicated, but I hope that answers your question, Heather.
Right. No, absolutely. That was good. So kind of going along now. So we're, you guys have gone through all these classes, meetings, deliberation, kind of coming up with what you want to present, having it dismissed practically in the vote. I don't know if you know the Lower Peninsula DMI. Do you know how their submission, how that fared? Was it essentially the same, completely dismissed, or are you not able to speak on that?
I won't speak too much to it simply because once we got into the final portion of our DMI process, we were separate. So anything that I would be able to contribute is just hearsay from my contact with other LP DMI members. But the 10,000 foot view was this. I think that their regulations were more messy than ours were. But I think their end process was better. And they didn't have the meddling and the political BS that we had to deal with here in the UP. But I don't think that they fared very much better than we did. I think they got maybe 2 or 3 things out of all their recommendations that actually passed muster.
Okay. Dennis, look like you're about to say something. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm just listening. I just shaking my head because I can't believe how bad things are up there. I haven't hunted up there to find out myself. Been a long time since I've been to the UP, but yeah, that's totally different than what's going on down here.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, I think, being up in the northern Lower Peninsula, I'm just east of that APR zone, so I'm not impacted by that. But I don't think it's quite as bad as what they experience up in the UP. But I mean, I can see the same things. As far as the Lower Peninsula is concerned, I don't necessarily agree with everything is blanketed across the entire Lower Peninsula. I don't think our deer herd should be managed the same as mid-Michigan on south.
Right.
So, I'm a little disappointed to see that. I don't really know how the DMI was composed in the Lower Peninsula, if it was broken up by northern lower and southern lower. So that'd be interesting to know. And if anybody's out there watching that has a resource for us to talk to from that Lower Peninsula DMI, we'd like to have them on and maybe talk about, their view and how that went for the Lower Peninsula also. So, so Jordan, so what's next? Where do we go from here?
So after the absolute dumpster fire of a DMI workday, one of the things that was noted is that the commissioners were discussing some regulations that my team didn't recommend. And that really had me wrinkle up my eyebrow. And I'm like, what are they talking about? So the long and short of it is the B board, if you remember me talking about the final day of our regulatory process, we had A, B, and C. We voted B out. The B board was on paper in front of the commissioners at the DMI workday. They were discussing and reviewing regulations that we voted out. So it was pretty obvious to me that there was some serious political games being played behind the scenes, and I was disgusted. I was angry. I couldn't even watch the whole meeting. I shut it off, and I had to go outside and do something else. It just infuriated me. I was feeling like our whole process was being violated, the integrity of it, because those weren't our team's wishes. Those weren't our team's recommendations. And we followed due process. We conducted a fair vote to see our regulations basically dismissed, and the regs that have failed us for more than a decade being discussed was deeply disturbing. So, and I sent you a copy of it, Tim, a day ago, I believe.
Yep.
Put on a pot of coffee and probably drank it all in 10 minutes and sat down and wrote a rather articulate letter to the commissioners outlining my concerns about due process not being followed and the political games that had been afoot throughout the process, and urging them not to be swayed by political or social influences and to conduct the process righteously. And as we were asked to do, follow the mandate of Proposal G. What does the science say? What does the data show us? I don't care about opinions. What does the science show us needs to be done? I outlined my grievances in bullet point fashion accompanying my letter. It was tactful, but it was pointed, I guess. I did not receive any response to that letter from any of the commissioners. So looming in mere days after that was the July 11th NRC meeting, which was the final vote at which the Deer Regs would be cast in stone. And that was every bit the train wreck that the DMI workday was, and perhaps worse. If you thought it couldn't get worse, hold on to your butts, because it did. There were 11,000 people, I think, at one point that had watched that live stream. And again, the commissioners were seemingly lost many times in a fog. At one point, we had commissioners that were voting against their own recommendations, not realizing what they were doing. They had Chad Stewart, they had Sarah Thompson, they had Brooke Parmalee, all basically holding their hand. Are you sure this is what you want to do, Commissioner? Because you said you don't support this, but you're about to vote it in. Are you sure you want to do this? That's literally how childish it was. When you've got the chair of the NRC that doesn't even know what amendment you're talking about and he's about to vote, there's a problem. It was disturbing. I don't know how else to say it tactfully. It was disturbing. The disorganization, the lack of understanding that our commission seemed to have about the protocols that they're bound to follow, the lack of knowledge on the subject matter, it was appalling. The meeting actually began with a presentation from Chad Stewart pertaining to our UP issues, in which he discussed some of those sex ratio problems, and he gave a very, very good presentation about carrying capacity. What should deer numbers be in relation to quality of the habitat, how that changes, how that fluctuates, and that bell curve, as he described it. I know the commissioners were obviously in the room and looking at Chad when he gave the presentation, but I think it was like pouring water on a rock, because moments later, they voted down everything my team did officially. It was done. They canned it all. That process that day was horrific. And anybody that wants to go back and watch it, I'll tell you two things. Number one, you're going to waste, 8 hours of your life that you'll never get back. But number two, if you think that there's exaggeration going on, or maybe it wasn't that bad, I urge you, go to the MUCC Facebook page and look it up, because they archive the NRC meetings for the public to view on their Facebook page. Anyone who wants to can go look at it, watch the whole thing. I believe they broke it up into 2 segments. It's all there. Don't take my word for it. See it for yourself. And if you haven't seen it, if you haven't heard about it, I'm telling you right now, you're going to be upset and you're going to be discouraged, and you should be. Some of the other things that went on tertiary to this, we had one of the special interest group leaders in the UP actually carpool with one of our UP commissioners to the meeting, where coincidentally the regulations that group was pushing basically got passed. But there's nothing to see here, folks. Everything was done righteously and on the level. Is that a crime? Well, no, I don't think it's a crime, but it's surely unethical. Conduct unbecoming, I guess, would be the right words. The earlier this winter at the meeting pursuant to all the coyote issues, one of them same commissioners went on a rant to the audience and disparaged the audience for having the audacity to speak to him about Proposal G. He was disgusted with us. The lack of decorum from the commissioners was interesting. So at the end of the day, the bottom line is this. The DMI members, UP and LP, worked their butts off for 4 months, and the commission pretty much burned it all down. And the politics and the wrangling behind the scenes ultimately steered the ship, I'm sorry to say. People often say those kinds of things. Well, it's all money, it's all politics. And it almost sounds like an excuse when people say it, but it's a reality. It's a very stark, gruesome reality. Our natural resources decisions are not being made in accordance with Proposal G, which, by the way, isn't a suggestion. It's statute law in the state of Michigan, installed by referendum of We the People, 1996. And for anyone that doesn't know, Proposal G basically says this. It's a mandate to the NRC that they will make all natural resources decisions based upon the best available sound scientific evidence, end quote. There was nothing scientific about what the commission did. At the DMI workday, the department had a 98-slide presentation prepared for the commissioners that they were not afforded the opportunity to present. Yeah, chew on that one. The commission, who is supposed to make decisions based on science, didn't want to hear the presentation from the DNR at the DMI workday. I don't even have the words to express to you the frustration that I feel and the disappointment that my team members feel. We put our heart and soul into it, and we did everything that we could, and we came up short. And it's a horrific feeling because our deer herd up here is not doing well. It's not doing well at all, and we needed change so badly. I can't begin to tell you. And, I'm not fool enough to sit here and tell you that if we just tweak a couple of regulatory levers that poof, there's going to be booners in the woods behind every tree next year. That's a crock. But we could have made some regulatory changes that would have mitigated the impacts of the bad winters when they do come. And I think one of the hardest things for people to deal with up here, because they're so used to the heyday of 94, 95, when there was 100 deer in every field, is we have a new ceiling for deer populations in the UP. There's a new carrying capacity. And oftentimes the narrative is the wolves ate all the deer. The wolves destroyed the deer herd. I'm not going to tell you they're not part of the equation, because they sure are. But we've got a deadly cocktail of issues, and chief among them is habitat. And we have destroyed far too much critical deer habitat. I mean, we're at the very northern limits for the most part of whitetail range in the United States. At least the Keweenaw is. It's big snow country. We got tons of apex predators. The deer are fighting for their lives every single day. And our deer have to do more with less than any other deer in most of the continental United States. And, regulatory changes weren't going to be a magic bullet, but we sure would have liked to have accomplished something. Any forward progress, any positive momentum would have made a difference. And there were a lot of people that were really hopeful that the DMI could get something done. I mean, I was hopeful we could get something done. I've been at this for, 14, 15 years now, this advocacy stuff. And this was the best chance I've seen it change in my lifetime. And it all went down the tubes.
I want to chime in here because I've been putting comments up on the screen. Just to clarify, the NRC is not the DNR. It is a commission, a group of people that were appointed by the governor. So let me repeat that. They were appointed by the governor, hand selected. And I don't know if I've ever seen anything on the internet out there of her ever being in a tree stand or living that heritage whatsoever, whether it's hunting or fishing. The information's out there. If you want to read the bio on those that are in the NRC, you can look that up and you can see their bio. And a lot of them claim to have grown up in the outdoors, to have lived the lifestyle that we so love. And it sure didn't present itself through the voting process. And the other thing I wanted to say too is I've seen a lot of comments on the meetings. If you have not watched the meetings, like Jordan said, it's pretty painful. I too had to shut it off. It was a cluster, a major cluster. And, I could pull some of these comments back up on the screen, but you can tell those that actually watched it, it was pathetic at best. Let's see. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get caught back up here on comments here.
With them being handpicked by the governor, there's no way to get them out, is there?
Well, that's one of the problems, and we'll tie into this portion of the discussion in a few minutes, I'm sure. But elections have consequences, and whoever's in the governor's chair has the absolute authority to appoint whom they please to NRC seats. Technically, the process is that once the governor makes their selections, they're supposed to go through the Senate Advice and Consent Subcommittee and basically be interviewed or vetted. I've been in attendance for some of those vettings. I've watched some of them virtually. Essentially, it's a rubber stamp unless there's something really egregious or some political game afoot. Most of the time, it's a rubber stamp. And that subcommittee only meets at the discretion of the chair. So there's been commissioners who were appointed without ever even going through the subcommittee at all because the chair just said, I don't feel like meeting.
Well, there's another comment here about the meeting. So Jordan, we were discussing this the other night. What can we do as sportsmen that, are just beside ourselves with the new regs? How can we impact change? How can our voice be heard by a group of people that, I think have proven they really don't care what we have to say, but, what platforms can we use and how can we make our voices heard and raise us think about all this? What are your thoughts on that?
So the first thing, and this is going to make some people uncomfortable, but that's okay. I got big shoulders. You need to start asking yourself, if you're a member of these clubs and these organizations, these special interest groups, what is my membership dollar doing for my deer herd? And that question needs to go deeper than, well, I get discount food plot seed, or well, I get a hay bale for the winter time, or I get a cool sticker, or I get a hat. What is your membership dollar doing for your deer herd? A lot of these groups, they'll send representatives to these meetings, and they'll sit down at the microphone at the commission table, and they'll say, well, I'm, John Doe, and I represent such and such XYZ deer organization. And on behalf of 40,000 members, we want X. That's a load of crap. So here's how that works. A lot of these organizations run a glorified Amway scam. Okay. You go to a banquet, right? The banquet. You buy your dinner ticket. It entitles you to whatever, 10 raffle tickets and a door prize, and you get a plate of roast beef. You drink some beers with the fellas. It's a social event, right? Maybe you win a new rifle, Yahoo. So on the bottom of your ticket, it says this: purchase of this ticket entitles its holder to 1-year membership. Congratulations, you're a member of that organization. Whether you wanted to be, whether you didn't want to be, you bought a ticket, you're a member, you're on the roll. So essentially, I'm going to tell you this is what happens. Out of the supposed 40,000 people that are represented, 38,975 people don't go to a meeting again. How do I know this? Well, I told you I was involved with some of these groups before. A monthly meeting for a UP stakeholder group might be 5 people. You have 900 people show up to a banquet to drink beer and win guns and whatever else, and they disappear. And there's 2 problems here. Number 1, okay, is your organization representing your interests, or are they representing their own views? That's a question you have to ask. If you don't know, shame on you. You should. What is your membership dollar getting? Are your views being represented? Does your organization poll its membership? Are they asking questions? How do you feel about $1? How do you feel about an archery doe tag? How do you feel about APRs? Are they doing that? Are they engaging their membership? Or are they just taking your money? I think there's a lot of people that are just taking the money. Hand in glove with this, the most powerful thing that you have as an outdoorsman, a sportsman, or sportswoman in the state of Michigan is your own voice. And when you hand over your $50 for your membership or whatever it is, and then you walk out the door feeling good because you did something for conservation, you screwed up. Never subcontract your personal responsibility to be a steward of our resources to someone else without knowing that they are doing the work. Don't sell your voice. That's the most powerful thing that you have. So that's all number 1, okay, is taking personal responsibility and not subcontracting. Number 2, what can we do with the commission? So that's a several-part answer. Number 1 is if they violate Proposal G, they're open to litigation, okay? A legal challenge can, and in my opinion, should be filed against them when they violate Proposal G, the sound science mandate. They should be compelled to provide their data, their sources, their science to justify their decisions. And if they can't, then they should get spanked for it. I think for too long that the commission we have right now has been a rogue bureaucracy that has systematically eroded our way of life. And if it isn't brought to heel and it isn't put in check, we're going to have serious problems. And, the unfortunate part about litigation against the commission is it's time consuming and it's costly. So nobody wants to do it. The attorney general is going to represent the commission in court. And obviously the state of Michigan has bottomless coffers, thanks to you, the taxpayer. So it's pretty hard if you're a small time deer group and you take exception to what's been done and you want to file a legal challenge. I mean, it's David and Goliath. It's a difficult fight. And I think it's designed to be that way, to frustrate. It's another layer of that bureaucratic onion. Is it possible to win? Well, sure, it is. And I think that more of our deer organizations in this particular instance should be having some very serious conversation over a cup of coffee about pooling resources and filing suit together to challenge this BS. If they're not, I'll be extremely disappointed. And that goes back to the first thing I said. What's your membership dollar getting you? What are they doing? So the next thing with the commission is elections have consequences. I talked about that already. When you have a predominantly blue government doing the appointing, you're going to have a predominantly blue disposition on the commission. That just comes with it. Elections have consequences. Unfortunately, and this is something I learned many years ago, there's a lot of voter apathy within the ranks of outdoors men and women. And let's just be honest, fellas. I mean, we're the kind of people that generally, we don't like political crap. That's not who we are. We don't deal in those things. We avoid those things. You know, the woods, the waters, the rivers, that's our retreat from all that noise of life, from all that garbage. Those are things we don't like. We don't enjoy. We don't like to engage in those discussions necessarily. I know there's some political fanatics that, you know, they could probably talk about this stuff all day, every day, but I think the vast majority of us don't enjoy that. The unfortunate part is when you don't engage in the politics of the natural resources world, and I hate to say this, but when you don't play the game, you lose the game. Because whether or not you choose to play, the game is still being played. And you have to get in there and you have to advocate for yourself and you have to advocate for your interests. And you do that at the ballot box, first and foremost. I talked about the most precious thing you have is your voice. When you go to that polling booth and you vote, it's the most precious thing in this country.
I agree.
Untold men and women, you know, wrote a blank check up into and including their own life and paid the ultimate price so that we had that ability to go to that ballot box and to use our voice. And that's something that we as outdoorsmen have to do a lot better. We got to get to the ballot box. And I'm not going to tell you should vote this or you should vote that. I'm just saying that you need to vote, period. However you're going to do that, use your voice, be heard. And what that does is that impacts the appointment process of the NRC. When you put people in office who share your views, who share your passions, who share your outlook on life, then by default, the policies that come out of those offices and those appointees are going to be policies that are in line with your views, with your beliefs, with your way of life. There's no middle ground. And unfortunately, for a long time in Michigan, we've been losing ground. We got to do a better job. We got to be plugged in. And I know it stinks. It is difficult. It's the last thing you want to do. You got a 60-hour work week. You got a wife. You got kids. You got projects you're trying to get done around the house. You're making firewood. You got a million things to do. The last thing you want to do is get online and see what's going on with the commissioners. When are these appointments up? Well, what's this House bill about here? What's that Senate bill about? Nobody wants to do those things. I don't want to do those things. But if we don't, the consequences will be more than we can bear. Our way of life will vanish. And I'll tell you something, we're a minority. It's hard for us to fathom because we associate with people like us. And you all think, well, I know plenty of guys that fish. I know plenty of guys that hunt. I don't know. What is he talking about? We're a minority. We are. Mm-hmm. If you break down the whole of the population of the state of Michigan, hunters are a severe minority. For example, you put the issue of wolf management in the UP through the ballot box. I'm going to tell you right now which way that's going to go. Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County are going to come out of the woodwork, and they're going to crush anything the rest of us have to say. Mm-hmm. You know it, and I know it. So elections have consequences. That's the second part. Number 3, when commissioners are appointed, okay, and you don't like the job a commissioner is doing, you have the option to send letters to the governor. I don't want this man or woman reappointed because I don't like the way they're serving the state of Michigan. I don't like the way they're making these decisions about our resources. I don't want them reappointed. Send a letter, send an email. It costs you nothing. It costs you nothing. Now people will laugh and they'll say, oh, Jordan, you got to be kidding me. The governor don't care about deer. You're out of your mind. Well, hear me out. You're absolutely right. The governor don't care about deer. And least of all, she don't care about deer in the UP.
Don't care about it either.
Because she doesn't want to hear about it, if she starts getting 100, 200 letters and emails complaining about what the NRC is doing and saying we don't want these people reappointed, the governor is going to walk down the hall to somebody's office and put a boot in their rear end. Why am I hearing about deer? I don't want to hear about deer. You need to fix this or you're out of here. You apply pressure by proxy. There's ways to game the system like that, and we need to get better at doing that because our adversaries do the same thing. Your SPCA, your Humane Society, all these people, they leverage all these political buttons. They know this stuff like the back of their hand. They do it every day. Thirdly, with the commission, if there's only garbage resumes in the stack, you're going to get garbage commissioners. Okay. We need good resumes in the stack if you want good commissioners. What does that mean? Well, that means maybe one of you that's listening needs to get online and fill out the appointment paperwork and talk to your legislators about what it's going to take to become an NRC commissioner. Step up and stand a post. We need good people. We need our people with our values that partake in our way of life, that they live it. It's not something that they simply do once a year on a weekend. Oh, maybe I'll go out and sit in the deer stand because it's the thing to do this time of year. It's festive, and I'll have a pumpkin spice latte while I see if the 30 pointer walks by. That's not who we are. And until we put people that have our heart and soul interests at heart in the chairs, we're dead in the water. We got to put good resumes in the stack. And that means good men and women in the state of Michigan have to be willing to do more than complain. You got to put skin in the game. It's not a paid position. It's a volunteer position. It's going to hurt. And there's a lot of homes that there's people that can't do that. They can't take that income loss, but there's plenty of people who are self-employed, people who are retired, maybe people who did 20 years in the military. They got out, earlier than the rest of us ever will. There's options out there, and we need to bring those people forward and encourage them to stand and speak for us. Lastly, the world is run by those who show up, even if those who show up are idiots. Okay. You can't adopt this woe is me disposition of apathy as a Michigan hunter. You don't like what's going on, and it seems like an unscalable wall of corruption in politics. And, I'm just a little guy. I can't do it. I'm not bothering with that. We need everybody we've got, and 10 we don't. And too many times I talk to people and I have these conversations. They'll say, Hoove, we're not a speaker like you. We're not articulate like you. Good Lord, you could write for the New York Times. It don't matter. It don't matter at all. We're not writing poetry here. Just get up and share your heart, share your soul. Go to a meeting and speak. Let them know you're displeased. The more people they hear from, the more pressure it exerts. You get 10, 15 people at a commission meeting. Do you really think they care? I assure you they don't. You put 300 people in a commission meeting, they're going to get nervous. And yeah, I know it stinks. I understand. I got a wife and kids. It's time away from home. It's 500 miles for me to go to a commission meeting in Lansing. It's $200 in fuel. It's a red-eye flight on no sleep down and back. And I admit, I don't go all the time, but I do go when I need to. There's sacrifices that you got to make. And this way of life that we love, this outdoor heritage in the state of Michigan, it won't endlessly self-sustain. It has to be guarded. It has to be protected, or it will be taken from you. And I can't emphasize that enough.
Absolutely. Extremely well said. Lots of comments echoing your sentiment. We have to raise a sink. We need to be irritating to them and inconvenient. They have nothing else better to do than make everyone else's life as miserable as they are. They don't know it. They don't know our lifestyle. So we're not miserable. I absolutely enjoy the outdoors, and I understand your point, Dan, and 100%. But they don't have the enjoyment like we do. They're not trying to raise their kids, raise their families in that heritage. So it doesn't mean anything to them, or maybe it doesn't mean as much as maybe a more fair statement to make. But, voting is the key. And for me, I'll admit everything that you said, I'm that guy. I like to escape. I want to get away from that political noise. It's just, it gets to be just overbearing at times, especially in election year right now. There's just so much, and it's good to get away, but there was an awakening here with this vote. And to see politics come into my deer woods now and, mess with our hunting for me personally, it's what's going on here. We need to figure this out. And, you're absolutely right. Someone put on here, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and, we need to start squeaking a lot louder and make our voices and our opinions heard, because this stuff matters to us. And we want it to matter to the next generation. And the more we give up and give away, the less it's going to matter to those, that we want to pass this on to. So, very well said, Jordan.
I think it's really important to point out too that there might be some people sitting back right now watching this whole debacle, and they're thinking, man, that really sucks for those deer guys. But, well, I'm a grouse hunter, and that doesn't really impact me. Geez, sorry about that, guys. Well, let me tell you what, you're next.
Yep.
Because earlier this winter, it was the predator hunters that got the shaft from the commission with no science, with no data, with no nothing. Had 3 months knocked off their season because one guy came in and cried crocodile tears. Ridiculous. A handful of months later, it's the deer hunters. So I'm telling you right now, if you think it won't come to your door, you're a fool. And we need to stand together. I don't care if you're a steelhead fisherman, you're an upland game hunter, you're a bear houndsman, you're a white-tailed deer diehard. It doesn't matter, because we all ought to be able to plant the flag and stand behind it and say we believe in sound scientific management of our resources and we'll accept nothing less, no matter what it is. That's a unifier. And if you can't get behind that, I don't know what to tell you. You got to get your head checked. Sound science management is something that we ought to be able to absolutely stand shoulder to shoulder unwaveringly for. We can argue about APRs or what the creel limit should be for brookies or all that later. Right now, the battle for our way of life is at your door.
Amen. Amen, brother. Well, Jordan, I appreciate you coming on and shedding light to this whole process. I mean, what we heard tonight, and then, talking with you Monday night also, I mean, it was a real eye opener. Like I said earlier on, I think we all knew that these guys didn't have our interest in mind and didn't know, especially if you watched the meeting. That definitely was the dead giveaway there. But, you did a great job of really, really spelling it out for everybody, giving us the behind the scenes of how this all went down and just the mismanagement of everything, that transpired. So, like Jordan said, we need to get out there and vote. We need to make our voices heard. Like, that's imperative. Or else things aren't going to change. And like you said, it's going to get worse. What's going to be next? What's the next thing they're going to go after? So, did see a lot of comments, and I know a lot of people want to debate APRs and 1 buck tags and the actual deer management. Oh, I got to put this up here. Hoover for NRC chairman.
In full disclosure, I did some soul searching through this process. And like I said, I've been at this 14, 15 years now, this advocacy work. And to be blunt about it, I don't look back and think, oh, yeah, I got something done here and I got something done there. And it's been a field of broken dreams for a lot of years, a lot of frustrations, a lot of heartache, a lot of hours in study. I think I've melted my phone lines at least 10 times. It became apparent to me that if I wanted to really make some changes, maybe I needed to take my own advice and put my money where my mouth is. So I have sought the support of my legislators and filled out the paperwork, and I'm throwing my hat in the ring for an NRC chair when one comes open for the UP.
Oh,
yeah, I applaud that. Oh. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you represent us very well. You're very articulate in the way you talk and very educated also. You know your stuff, and you're someone I can get behind 100%. Much rather see you on the board than the ones we currently have. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah. But I want to thank you again for joining us tonight, Jordan. As I was kind of getting into the actual deer management, maybe we can have another live and we can share our opinions on what we think will be better. That's always a fun topic to talk about and agree and disagree on those type of things. But definitely wanted to keep this point tonight about this whole process and everything that went on behind the scenes. So, Jordan, again, thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. everybody out there watching, please let's get this out there. If you enjoyed Jordan tonight and hearing what he had to share tonight, I mean, it's definitely eye-opening, and it brings a lot of awareness behind the scenes of what's going on and the folks making these decisions. Please share this. We need to get this message out there. They need to know how this happened, how it went down, and how we can change this. So share this away, get this information out there. And, we appreciate all of you for watching, joining us. A lot of you stayed on. We're at an hour and 20 minutes. So, it's a pretty lengthy topic tonight. We appreciate all of you. And if you're just now watching this, maybe you didn't catch it live, same thing. Share it around. We got to get this out there. We got to stand up for ourselves. So, Dennis and Ray, anything before we go?
I just wanted to thank you, Jordan, for coming on, man. It's definitely an eye-opener. And, hopefully we get you back on. Maybe see what happens next year.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Piggyback. Thanks, man. It's nice to meet you. And I learned a lot because I didn't really know the whole, thing about all this. But, wow, what an eye-opener. Very, very well done.
No, I appreciate you guys sharing your platform with me. I very much enjoyed the opportunity. I'm very thankful for that. And anytime you guys want to talk deer talk, regs talk, issues, natural resources, whatever, I'm more than willing to come on with you guys and chew the fat and take questions. I'm really super accessible too, right? If somebody wants to reach out to me and have some conversation, they can hit me up on Facebook and I do DM folks my phone number. I'm willing to have conversations with anybody, even people that disagree with me.
Absolutely.
Well, man, I'll talk your ear off about deer hunting. How much time you got?
All the time you need, brother.
Awesome. Well, once again, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Jordan, again, thank you so much. Job well done. We appreciate having you on. And until next time, guys, get out there and enjoy the great outdoors.